The cabin had always been my escape, a place that felt removed from the world of obligations, deadlines, and noise. It's built by my own hands over the course of 3 summers. It sat high in the mountains, cradled by towering pines, and wrapped in the scent of cedar and wild sage. I had chosen the spot carefully, just far enough from the road that visitors couldn't stumble upon it by accident, but still close enough to a trailhead that I could haul in lumber and supplies. To me, it wasn't just a retreat, it was a symbol of freedom. And yet, even here, supposedly away from the reach of petty bureaucracy, the Homeowners Association managed to sink its claws in. They had been hounding me for years. Letters arrived like clockwork, threatening fines for non-compliant wood storage, for the shade of my roof shingles, even for my porch lanterns being too bright. At first I laughed them off. Who in their right mind thought they could dictate how a man managed a cabin on land he owned outright? But the laughter faded when their demands turned to fines. Then legal notices, then open threats of foreclosure. The HOA in this mountain community wasn't like others. They weren't busybodies with clipboards and petty grudges. They were ruthless, operating like a syndicate in suits. They levied special assessments for phantom projects, collected dues that disappeared into offshore accounts, and used liens as a weapon to seize property from anyone who dared question them. I had seen them bulldoze an old man's shed for non-compliance and run off a young couple who couldn't keep up with mounting fines. Most of the neighbors lived in fear, too cowed to speak up. I wasn't one of them. I had gathered everything: copies of fraudulent invoices, bank statements showing money vanishing into shell corporations, even recorded threats from board members. I had something the HOA didn't expect: the patience to play their game long enough to expose them. And on that fateful morning, I was meeting the one person who could finally bring them down. The Attorney General of the state arrived just after sunrise, his black SUV crunching over the gravel driveway. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, his reputation one of incorruptibility, the kind of rare official who couldn't be bought or bullied. We shook hands on the porch before stepping inside, the mountain air still crisp enough to fog our breath. He carried no entourage, no flashing lights, just a leather briefcase and a quiet determination. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I laid out the evidence. The contracts doctored with inflated costs, the bank transfers routed through dummy companies, and the complaints from homeowners who had lost everything. He listened carefully, asking precise questions, occasionally scribbling notes. The gravity of what we were building together settled heavy in the air. We weren't just documenting mismanagement, we were uncovering organized fraud, extortion, and racketeering. It's the kind of crimes that didn't end with fines but with prison sentences. For the first time in years, I felt hope. I imagined the HOA board hauled into courtrooms, their smug confidence stripped away, their empire collapsing under the weight of their own greed. My wife had begged me more than once to sell the cabin, to walk away before they ruined us. Walking away wasn't in my blood. I had served my country, fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. And I wasn't about to be bullied out of my own land by men hiding behind bylaws. And now, with the Attorney General on my side, I knew the tide was turning. But just as he leaned over to review the last set of documents, the floor shuddered beneath us. A deep, mechanical growl echoed through the valley, rattling the dishes. In the cupboards, my heart sank as I recognized the sound. The Attorney General looked at me sharply, but I was already on my feet, moving toward the window. Through the trees, the monstrous silhouette of a bulldozer appeared, its blade lowered like a weapon. Behind it marched a line of pickup trucks. HOA board members in pressed khakis standing in the beds, pointing and shouting orders. They weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to erase me. And with them, they were about to erase the one meeting that could have ended their reign. The first strike came quick. The bulldozer's blade slammed into the porch, splintering wood and sending shards flying. The cabin shook violently as the board members watched with smug satisfaction, assuming they had caught me alone, but they hadn't. Inside, standing in a cloud of dust and shattered glass, was the Attorney General of the state. In that single, reckless act, the HOA had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. They hadn't just demolished a cabin over fabricated fees. They had committed a crime in front of the one man who could dismantle them completely. The first blow of the bulldozer had been meant to terrify, to cow me into surrender. Instead, it set in motion a chain of events the HOA could never have anticipated. The Attorney General and I emerged from the dust-choked wreckage of the cabin, coughing but unbroken, our clothes streaked with plaster and splinters. Outside, the HOA board members stood watching, their smug smiles stretching across their faces as if they had finally proven their dominance. Their leader, a balding man in his 60s with a Rolex gleaming on his wrist, shouted through a megaphone, "This is what happens when you don't pay your dues." His cronies laughed, emboldened by the destruction, oblivious to the fact that they had just delivered themselves into the jaws of justice. The Attorney General's eyes burned with a fury I hadn't expected from a man usually buried in statutes and legislation. He brushed debris off his suit and said in a low voice, "Do you realize what they've just done? We don't need a courtroom to prove intent anymore. They've handed us everything." I nodded, already cataloging the evidence in my head. The heavy machinery brought in without a permit, the public nature of the destruction, the fact that they had targeted a property owner who was actively cooperating with the state's highest law enforcement officer. It was beyond reckless. It was criminal arrogance on display, live and undeniable. I stepped forward, out onto what remained of the porch, raising my voice over the growl of vengeance. "Do you idiots know who you just bulldozed?" I shouted. The laughter from the board faltered as the Attorney General strode out behind me, dust still clinging to his jacket. Silence rippled across the scene as recognition dawned on a few faces. The Attorney General was no stranger to the news. His face had graced headlines for high-profile cases and sweeping reforms. To see him here, standing amid the wreckage, was like watching a judge rise from the bench and step directly into the battlefield. One of the board members dropped his clipboard, his face blanching. Another stammered, This isn't what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. A deliberate act of intimidation, destruction of private property, and obstruction of justice. The Attorney General pulled out his phone, speaking calmly into it, as if this was nothing more than another day at the office. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until state troopers in dark uniforms and tactical gear flooded the dirt road. The HOA members who had been so bold a moment before began to shrink, their confidence evaporating as they were surrounded. The troopers secured the scene with military precision, their weapons drawn but steady, their commands sharp and uncompromising. The bulldozer operator was yanked from his seat, hands zip-tied behind his back. The board members were herded together, their protests ringing hollow in the mountain air. "You can't do this. We have bylaws," one of them shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. The Attorney General fixed him with a glare so cold it cut through the chaos. "Bylaws don't authorize felony vandalism, extortion, or racketeering," he said, "and that's before we get into the part where you just tried to destroy evidence in a state investigation." The HOA president sputtered, sweat trickling down his temple. We didn't know he was here." His eyes flicked to me with venom as if I had tricked him. But the Attorney General wasn't interested in excuses. He turned to the lead trooper and said, "Book them on every charge applicable. We'll sort out the rest in court." The trooper nodded, his men already moving with efficiency born of training. Handcuffs clicked, engines shut down, and the once smug board members were reduced to a lineup of frightened criminals, their empire crumbling around them. I stood beside the Attorney General as the sun broke through the trees, casting light across the wreckage of my cabin. It hurt to see it reduced to rubble, every plank I had nailed, every stone I had set by hand, now splintered and crushed. But as I watched the HOA board being loaded into patrol cars, I felt something stronger than grief: vindication. For years, they had operated as if untouchable, wielding fear like a weapon. They had bulldozed my sanctuary, believing it would break me. Instead, they had bulldozed themselves straight into the arms of the law. The Attorney General turned to me, his voice low but steady. "You've done more than save your cabin. You've opened the door to dismantling this whole corrupt machine." Every homeowner they've threatened, every dollar they've stolen, we're going to bring it all to light. I nodded, staring at the wreckage one last time before lifting my chin toward the horizon. Then let's finish this, I said. If they thought demolishing my home was the end, they've got another thing coming. This is just the beginning.